A leaked British document is what I think pretty embarrassing for Americans. Take a look at this, all right? It's a chart labeled Extreme Right-Wing Indicators and Warnings. It's basically an internal guide for British Army officers to help them spot extreme right-wing attitudes among soldiers. So take it, just have some fun with it. Look at it, it looks like bingo a little bit, but some of the warning signs, if you'll notice, they mimic a guy that we hear from far too often.
And the chart is almost orange.
Listen,
it's already at a threat level.
That's indicator number one, that's there. But yeah, people are pointing out that this does mimic, a lot of the issues on there mimic behavior of the president of the United States, specifically things on there like the use of blatantly untruthful or incorrect references to immigrants, the use of the phrase traitors, someone who becomes increasingly angry at perceived injustices or threats to so-called national identity, or someone who refers to political correctness as some left-wing or communist plot. Now, the Ministry of Defense has confirmed to BuzzFeed News that this is genuine. A spokesperson, though, stresses the document was not meant for general circulation. Like I said, it was a leak. It was drawn up in response to a specific incident. The arrest of 4 soldiers in 2017 for being part of the banned neo-Nazi group National Action to provide guidelines for the chain of command in hopes of preventing any similar instances in the future. And while the document is actually not a guide for determining far-right extremism in the United States, if it was, they pointed out that it likely would not have described themselves as patriots because of how popular that term is, just kind of broadly in America. It does, though, match many current mainstream US conservative tropes and demonstrates how often right-wing conservatism overlaps with more troubling behaviors. And you'll remember that Twitter said they struggled with creating an algorithm, that could ban Nazi words and racist language, and because they would inadvertently kick off a lot of Republicans.
Yeah. So look, whenever I see a story like this, I always think, what if the shoe was on the other foot? So for a while, there was a string of environmental terrorists. Okay. So so if you were tracking those, then you might track words like climate change. But wait a minute, a lot of people use climate change. So in this case, I would put the word patriot under that bucket. If you're gonna look after every person in America that says patriot, I mean, Sirius Satellite Radio, their right-wing channel is called Patriot, right? So that goes too far, and not only because it's too broad and it's unfair to the right wing, but more importantly, it's not gonna help you do detective work. It's not gonna help you get the bad guys, right? But when you have other things on there, threats of violence, bingo, right? Of course, and again, shoe on the other foot. If it was an environmental group that was doing, burning down places, which has happened in the past, and there was threats of violence, okay, yeah, that's the one you track, right? That makes sense. And then there are other things that make sense about reference to white culture, the great replacement conspiracy theory, and this is where it gets uncomfortable because the conservative talk show host and Trump does talk about that. So both Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson said the immigrants will not replace us. And so there's this theory that the immigrants are gonna come and replace white Americans. And if you remember, in Charlottesville, they chanted, the Jews will not replace us. Now so it's because it's uncomfortable doesn't make it not true. They do have to track these things because they are a real threat.
I mean, it gets confusing. I do think, well, one, on the conservative side, I feel like there's a land grab for legitimacy with words. Patriot is a dangerous one. I think that is something that you see these extremist groups using, and there are code words. There's codes that are being communicated in there in some ways. But I think it's important to draw that distinction, right? If you see this kind of a thing and you look at it like this is just a blanket way to find extremism, no, but be aware of the signs, be aware of the ways in which people are communicating. The things like traitor, the things that are used to just gin up anger, to gin up hate, and to gin up the otherizing of it all. Those are the things that I wish Twitter had an algorithm for that. Because I've seen those people, they talk to me quite often. In fact, the algorithm might go through me. It's like if you, I know where some hate speech ads. It's often it's at Jordan Klepper. So I can send it their way.
Well, Jordan, if you did your Twitter account on my Twitter account and the replies, you'd have this, right?
That's
right, because the right wing is, I don't know if you know this, they're a little vitriolic online, right? And so in response to my tweets and apparently yours, etc., there'll be a lot of, oh, you're a traitor, treason, this, that, the other thing. And by the way, I got no problems with that. I mean, I'm not like Trump, but I got thick skin. So all those name callings and all the things. But once you start talking about how you're gonna murder me, which by the way, it happens every day, and it's too many to deal with, well, I guess if it's an important person, right? Or if it's like a real threat, whether it's in Britain or the US, yeah, that's what you track when you got threats of violence. And it applies to both sides, but in this day, both in Britain and the US and all over Europe, the right wing does it much more. The Anti-Defamation League said every terrorist attack inside the US in 2018 that it resulted in a death was done by right-wing extremists. So that's just a reality. It's uncomfortable. If you're a right winger, it doesn't mean you did it, but it is concerning. And what doesn't help is if you whitewash it, if you will, and go, hey, you know what? It's even. No, that's not true. Then what you're doing is political correctness. And if you further said one of two things, well, then we should investigate the left wing just as much. But wait, there's not as much threats from there. So then you're gonna be wasting the time of investigators who are actually trying to stop synagogue shootings, church shootings, bombings, etc., right? Or if you said, as they did under Obama, if you remember, President Bush did a report under his administration saying, watch out for right-wing extremists because they're gonna do a lot of shootings and bombings, which turned out to be completely true, right? But it was released when Obama became president, even though it was done under Bush, right in the beginning of Obama's term. And Rush Limbaugh on Fox News yelled at Obama so much over it, they withdrew it. And they lowered the number of people working on solving cases of right-wing domestic terrorism. And voila, we have massive right-wing domestic terrorism. And obviously Trump didn't pick it back up. In fact, since he's taken office, they've reduced that staff even more. So just look at the real threats. Don't overgeneralize, but at the same time, make sure that you're keeping us safe and doing the right job in finding out who's the real threats.
Yeah, I do think sometimes, and it's so weird because I was thinking about a lot, like the word patriot, right? And how they pointed out, like, no, that wouldn't be fair here. I don't know anybody who uses that word.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is, and I've never really heard it in a way that wasn't like anti every other country, like being used like kind of like as coded language for like, and so it's. I feel like the word was co-opted a long time ago. I don't know.
I feel like I've done a handful of pieces recently with veterans who I think obviously use that word as a self-identifier, and it comes from a place of pride. And I think I see that and I understand that. My grandfather would use that word. I use that word. I think if it comes from a place of pride, I think there is something we can rally behind with that. I see it weaponized as a way to build up that wall, for lack of a better term, or perhaps the best term, as a way to say that I am here and you are not. And I think that's where I do feel like sometimes perhaps progressives or people on the left now feel gun shy about, if you will, for maybe also lack of a better term. I don't have any of the terms here, but I do think it is. It suddenly feels like, oh, that's politicized, where it shouldn't. It should, like, pride shouldn't be politicized. Right. It should be the kind of thing that we could rally around to unify. Instead, it is something that is taken as like an emblem of I'm on the team, you're not. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, both sides have kind of done a land grab on different terms. I mean, when you mention pride, I think of gay pride.
Yeah. Liberals got that one. Liberals got
so
pride.
We have pride. Haha. Okay. But I hear what you're saying, and it's not used much in left-wing circles. But funny enough, the person who uses it a decent amount is me. Yeah. Because I'm a immigrant to this country.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, and I'm really patriotic. That's part of the reason why we have the flag in the background, right? And to me, that's not their flag, that's our flag. And I believe in the idea of America, and I believe in a shining city on a hill. Have we always lived up to that? Right?
Have we ever?
I know, but it's really important that we not give that up.
Right.
That we strive to be a city on a hill. We strive to do the right things, and we strive to be patriotic in all the right ways. So I don't want to cede patriotism to the bad guys. The ones that go, I'm patriotic, which means I exclude everyone else. No, the point of America is actually to be inclusive, and that's part of what makes us patriotic.